My name is Chelsey. I didn't grow up a Christian. I had a very average, comfortable life. Nothing too dramatic happened. I just wasn't thinking about religion. I actually prided myself in kind of just being an intellectual, and I had big life plans, and I didn't have time to think about whether or not God was real. It's funny because that question ended up consuming a lot of my teenage years. But I had a lot of friends who were Christian, and they were so sure of their faith, and I really respected that they had a belief system, and they were so genuine. I loved hanging out with them, but I knew that God stuff wasn't for me. I think a lot of my hesitation with Christianity just came from thinking that to become a Christian meant that you had to kind of give up your identity to become a religious person. And I liked who I was, so I wasn't interested in that stuff. But despite that, I went to a church youth group because I liked hanging out with my friends. I listened to a lot of pastors speak. I asked a lot of questions because I was just so curious about who this Jesus person was and what compelled my friends to all kind of believe in this guy. In college, I actually joined a campus ministry group. I wasn't a Christian, but I would go, and I actually found a community of friends there who loved me and who knew me and who met me where I was at, and I loved it. But I just wanted proof that God was real. There's no burning bush, so how was I supposed to know whether or not it was real? I spent years kind of just wrestling with these big questions and just how crazy it all was, but I knew that when I hung out with Christian friends, or when I listened to worship music, or when I read the Bible, like something inside of me just clicked, and it kind of felt like the universe was coming into focus. And I had all these emotions and these feelings, but I still was just stubborn, and I didn't have proof, and I just couldn't be sure whether, like, what was going on. So one day I was sitting in church just kind of thinking through all these big questions like I always had, when all of a sudden just this huge thought just like overwhelmingly crossed my mind, and it was just a shout of like being called out, just like, Chelsey, you have had enough time to think. What are you actually gonna do about it? And it was just like, it was alarming and it was sudden, but it was such a simple question. It was just, what are you gonna do about it? I'd spent years wondering if God was real, and all of a sudden it just became so obvious. Like, why not just ask him? And so there was no burning bush, there was no lightning strike, there was no prophecy that came in that moment. It just started in a quiet, intimate moment. It's me sitting there with my journal and just writing yes. And that was a yes to God, and just saying, God, if you're there, if you're listening, I'm open. And I think it was then when I realized that faith wasn't something that just happened to me or was going to happen to me and kind of change my identity or take away who I was. Instead, faith was a choice and an action. And I realized that there was a lot more agency and intellect involved in choosing to get to know Jesus. And it was in that moment that I kind of realized, oh, this changes everything. I didn't see it at the time, but now looking back, it's funny because all those years I was doing exactly what Jesus says to do in Matthew chapter 7, which is ask and it shall be given, seek and you shall find, and knock and the door shall be opened. And so God was there waiting the whole time. He was just waiting for me to knock. And I'm really glad I did.